and welcome. My name is Xander. Welcome back to the Python Code Challenge series. In this tutorial, we look at returning capital letters from a string. This tutorial will be broken down into 4 components. We'll go through the problem description and then go ahead and we'll go straight to the solution walkthrough. For those who would like to, in part 3, we'll take a look at some alternative solutions and I'll try and give you some information so we can expand our knowledge of the Python language. Now, if that isn't enough for you, we then move into part 4. Now, I had forgotten in the first challenge to do this. So because there is a general lack of testing tutorials and courses available, I thought you might appreciate, because it is an important skill set for many developers to be able to create and test their code. So here I'm just going to take you through step by step, building a simple test for our challenge solution. Here is the challenge for number 2. We need to write a function named capitals. This function should take a single parameter. So taking a single parameter, so we're going to pass in a string to our function. So your function should return a list of all the capital letters from the string that's passed into the function. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new file. I'll call this 002.py. Let's go ahead and create a new function. We're going to call that, of course, capitals. And then we're going to need an attribute here, sorry, a parameter, which is going to be word. So this is the word or the string that we're going to pass into this function. Right, so if you remember in Python, a string is an iterable. So we can iterate over a string. So each letter, if you like, in a string can be considered an individual element, which we can then iterate over. So the word, for example, test, this is an iterable if it's a string. So what's going to happen here is that we can run a loop to loop over this string here. And we can, as we loop through, it's going to iterate over each letter. So for each letter, we can test to check to see if it's a capital or not. So we're going to run a loop here. So first of all, let's just set up an empty list so that we can pass any capitals into that list. And now we're going to set up a for loop. Okay, so for each time we loop through, a letter will be passed into char, and then we can perform the action of checking to see if it's a capital or not. So if there is a for char in and then the actual word, so this is the word that gets passed into this function. So imagine our word is test that we pass into here. This is now test. So for each loop, each letter will get passed over to char, and then we can now perform an action to make sure or check to see if it's a capital or not. So in this case, we're going to perform an if statement. So if the character at this point in the loop, so if it's the first loop and we're using test, we're passing test into this function, this is going to be t. So if t is upper, so we're going to use is upper. So I do apologize for repeating myself, but let's just check to see what we've done so far. So if we were to pass in the word test into this function now, what we have now is the word test here, right? So that means that we're going to now run a for loop. So for each letter in that word test, we're going to loop through. So t will then get placed into char, for example. And now what we can do is in this if statement. So t is upper. So we're going to check to see if that's in uppercase or lowercase. Now, if it is uppercase, then what we're going to do here is we're going to append our list. Okay, so we'll append our list with the letter t. And that will now be entered in our list here that we've created. And that's about it. And then in the second loop, we'll then check the E letter, and then the S letter, then the T letter. And then if any of those are uppercase, they will then get entered into our list. So we'll then just go ahead and return. So let's just return X. Let's go ahead and try this out. So print, and then we want to print the function output. So let's call this function. Let's pass in an attribute, which is going to be our string. So A, B, C, D, E. So this should return ace because A, C, and E are capitals. Let's just give that a go. And there we go. So by all means, that isn't the only way we can solve this problem. But what was key here is the isUpper function. Let's have a look at some different solutions and talk a little bit about the theory and other functions and tools available in Python to help us achieve the same solution. So as we probably grasped here, the isUpper is obviously very important to check the character to see if it is an uppercase or lowercase. Now, let's just go ahead and, as I alluded to, there are other functions here, so isLower. So let's just run this, and you can see now we're just producing the lowercase. So we can also utilize isSpace. So let's go ahead and do that. You can see that there is one space. Let's see if we can get two spaces, so we can check to see how many spaces there are. Or it gives us a tool set to manipulate longer strings potentially. It's always good to potentially know those type of tools to help us manipulate strings further. Now we can achieve the same output without utilizing isUpper. So let's just move back to isUpper. So if we were just to remove this here, we could probably just utilize just normal list comprehension here to achieve the same outcome. So for example, A is less than or equal to the character, which is less than or equal to Z. Okay, so this should return the same outcome. So let's just clear this. And there we go. So we achieve the same result. So maybe out the boundaries here for a beginner, but it's worth at least knowing or being aware of. So here we could also utilize a generator. Okay, so I won't go into too much detail here. And if you are interested in learning a little bit more about generators, have a look at the GitHub repository for this tutorial. And there's a link at the bottom which will take you to a great resource to read through iterators, or at least to get the general idea, because it's likely if you are new, you are looking at other people's code, it's good to understand and to identify at least the fact that maybe this is an iterator or they're using an iterator to help you understand how the code flows. So let's go ahead now, change this up. So we get rid of this completely, and we're now change this into an iterator. So let's just go for x equals, and here we're going to use the square bracket. So char for char in Word if char dot isUpper. So you can see there's some similar tools here that we're using, isUpper of course. So here for character in Word if character is upper. Okay, so essentially what we're doing here is we're just looping through the word again, and we are just extracting those capital letters. That's essentially what this statement is performing. So what we can now do is yield. So let's use yield, I spelled this correctly, yield x. So that will help us then return the result. So let's go ahead now and print. So what we need to do here when we're utilizing generators, we're going to need to utilize next to return this. If we didn't use next, let's just go ahead and have a look. That's going to return a generator. So what we want to do is extract the information from the generator. So here we're going to utilize next, and let's just wrap this up and then print out again, and there we go. So that's just something for you to explore. It would take me or take us, 15, 20, half an hour really to go through all the different aspects of utilizing Python generators. And there will be, or if there isn't already, a tutorial specifically dedicated to that. So let's now go ahead and go back to our initial function here. And now let's go ahead and build a test. So completely optional, of course. I just wanted to explain, or just to go through building some simple tests in these tutorials for those who are new or beginners to Python who haven't started testing yet. So I'll take you through this step by step, give you some general background. Obviously, there's a lot to this potentially. So I'll just give you some general background to the code that we're just about to write. We'll build a simple test testing our function that we've created, or the initial solution that we generated. If you are completely new to Python or a beginner to Python, you haven't started testing yet, you won't know about unit test. So unit test is a testing framework which we can bring into our code here and utilize the tools within that framework to help us test our code. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and import unit test. Okay, so that will make available the framework available so that we can extend from then, dip in and grab some tools that we're going to need to perform some tests. So if you are again new to Python, you won't maybe have started utilizing classes, object-oriented Python. So here we're going to build a class. We're going to call this test capital method. So that's going to be our class where we're going to add some tests inside of this class. So we're going to extend from unit test. We're going to bring in a tool called test case. So that's going to enable us to then perform some of the tests that we're going to need to do. We're only going to perform one test here. So we're going to need some data for our test. So let's go ahead and build a new test. So what we're going to do here is we're going to build a set of data. The first being the actual data we want to pass through our function. And then the second item here will be the result. So I'll be able to utilize that in each test to check to see if the result is what is expected from when I pass this data, A, B, C, D, E. So that's what I'm going to put through the pass over to the function. And then the outcome of that should be A, C, E. So we just add some more data here. So let's perform this again. So let's do the opposite, A, B, C, D, E. So the outcome of that should be B and D. So that's the data setup. So if you're going to run some tests, you're going to need some data. So there's the data that we're going to utilize. Now let's go ahead and build a test. So I'm going to call this test just capitals. We're going to take in self. So this just allows me to access, for example, here, the parameter list, our data. So self, and then now let's build a loop. Okay, so what I want to do here is why I'm building a loop here is because I've got two pieces of data here that I want to try with our function. So I'm going to loop through our list here, our data, and extract this first and then this. So there's two pieces of data here. So I'm going to reference that as P1, part 1 or position 1, and then position 2, or just the second component here. So we're going to reference it as P1, P2. So that's going to grab the data each time I iterate over this list. And then where is that data? So that's in self param list. Okay, so that gets the data from my list. We're now going to create a loop. So we're going to loop over this list obviously twice. So the first time around, we're going to use this data. The second time around, we're going to use this data here. Right. So now we're going to loop through that. Let's go ahead now and create a subtest so we can actually kind of then perform a test. So let's just imagine now we run this test, isn't completed yet. So this is going to be passed over to, this will get passed over to my function here, capitals. Obviously that's going to get iterated over and it's going to extract the capitals. That's going to be placed here in X in my list. It's going to return a list. Now the problem is here, I want to build a test to return not a list, but I want to return ace, because when I put that through my function, it should return ace. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass that through my function, and then I'm going to check the outcome of it against this here. So we know this should be the outcome of passing this through my function. So the problem at the moment is that this function here returns a list. So I just need to be careful of that and then convert that. So let's go ahead and create a new variable here. So I want to return, so I'm going to basically join. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this join function. What that's going to do is it's going to extract or convert the list that's returned here from my function into a string. So let's go ahead and do that. So capital, and then I want to, that's my function. So I'm calling my function here. Now I'm going to pass in my data. So the data I want to pass in is going to be P1. That's referring to the first part of the data here. Okay, so I pass that in. So that's going to return, this here is going to return, is going to be performed first, of course. So it's going to return my list, and then I'm going to use join to basically convert that into a string. So what should get returned from here is A, C, E, and not a list, A, C, and E. Okay, so that's that. So now what I'm going to do is use self assert equal. So assert equal takes two parameters here, right? So this is basically a method, a tool that we're utilizing from unit test, if you like. And that's going to allow us to check two items. So what we want to do is we want to check the outcome of performing or passing our data into the function against the actual output that we're expecting. So we're expecting ACE. So what we're going to do here, we're going to pass in our string 1, which is the outcome of us passing our data over to our function. And then we're going to say the outcome of it should be whatever's in P2. Okay, so in this case here it would be ACE, and here would be BD. So let's do that. So this should be P2. Okay, so what we're saying here is that when we pass this data over in our function, the outcome of it, once we've used join, should be, in this case, ACE, in this case, BD. So now we're using assert equal, which takes two parameters, and we're just basically comparing them at this case, in this case. So we're just comparing the outcome of our, so I'm repeating myself a lot here, of our data that we pass through the function, and then what we expect it to be. So that's the test. That should, we can now run that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to if name equals main. So if we run this file directly, then the name of this file, this module, is going to be called main. So therefore we're just going to initiate the unit test straight away. So main. Okay, so that will initiate the test. So let's go ahead now and run this, and you can see, if I bring this up, you can see that we run this file and there is an error. So capital object has no attribute parameters. So I've just got a bit of a typo here. I've missed the A there. Okay, so let's just try this again. So I'm going to run this file again, and there we go. So the file has been run, and you can see the outcome of this. It's run one test, and the test is okay, so the test has passed. So let's just mix this up a bit. So let's just change that to ACES. So obviously this is going to be incorrect now. So let's try the test again. And you can now see it's kind of giving me some, it's giving me some feedback, if you like, here, in that it tells me that it was expecting ACE, but in actual fact, what was returned was ACES. Okay. Apologies. Okay, so it's giving me some information here, which is useful. So obviously that's incorrect. So that's just showing the fact that it's working. So let's go ahead and we can add just a print here, just to, in addition to the test, just make sure it's printing what we need it to. So capitals, yep. So let's just pass in A, B, C, D, E. There we go. So now when I print this out, or when I run this file, sorry, you can see we print out the list here. We've still run the test and everything's okay. So I do hope that was useful. There we've gone through the solution, and as you've seen, there are many different solutions potentially for this challenge. Now, it may have left you with more questions than answers, particularly when it comes and we're talking about generators. So that is definitely something. And like I said, have a look at the GitHub repository. There is a link there that's going to take you to, I think, realpython.com, which is an excellent resource if you haven't already found it, where you can learn more about Python for free. So the testing, hopefully you enjoyed the testing. Hopefully that was useful. If you haven't started testing, this is a good insight into start building tests. Here we just use assert equal. That was the main core component there to understand assert equal. I think as well as using name main, that's something again where you can have a look on the channel. There's an individual tutorial for that. So what's more, thank you very much, and hopefully I'll see you in the next tutorial.